when you're cooking in the kitchen for those instruments, how do you decide, hey, let's go crazy Finnish instrument to jazz, and how does that work? I mean, what advice do you have for composers as they're trying to decide on the palette or the ingredients for the big pot they're going to throw this in for the show?
Well, sometimes you might get kind of idea quickly, but very often it feels like this time it's gonna fail. Like now I'm totally out of ideas and I'm not gonna come up with anything. But there's I think it is sort of again related sort of the subconscious that you teach your subconscious how what you actually want to do and then you present the puzzle basically and then it gets into solving it and then those things just come up like, oh, it's just random thing that pops up, like I think that might work.
Well, welcome to the podcast today. My name is Jason Tonioli. This is the Successful Musicians Podcast, and my special guest is Panu Aaltio from Helsinki, Finland. He is an amazing composer. Orchestration, Panu, that you've done is incredible. It's very rare that I've run across somebody who's as talented as you when it comes to just bringing the orchestra together and getting the sound you get. It's amazing. So you are doing TV and film. I mean, you guys should go check this out. Make sure you scroll down and click on the show notes for sure. But Panu you've won multiple awards. You've got the International Film Music Critics Association, where you've won multiple times with that for some of your nature films. I know one of the Composer of the Year in 2022. You were up for Composer of the Year competing against Hans Zimmer, James Newton Howard, Johnny Greenwood, Nicholas Bertel. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. So welcome to the podcast. I am excited to share kind of your journey, your story, and just have you share some advice for other musicians that are, wishing they could be, have gone through the 20-year overnight success that you've gone through with your career. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, and yeah, thank you. It's great. Thanks for having me.
Panu, let's start out. I know. I mean, you grew up in Helsinki, right? So that's where you were born and raised. You were a cello player. Give us kind of a little bit of the story. How did you end up starting out in music, and how, talk about the journey to get to USC and then to where you are today. I'm just curious that arc and story arc that you have to get to where you are to share first.
Yeah. There's definitely music in the family. My parents actually met in a choir, so they kind of both have been doing music. But my mom has done a long career as a piano teacher, and she is originally a sort of concert pianist. She graduated from Sibelius Academy in Helsinki, kind of found her calling in teaching music. And also my cousin, she's a I would say one of the top classical singers in Finland, and she's a bit older than me. So she went to Sibelius Academy before me. So there's actually kind of there's a bit of pressure when I sort of said I would apply to Sibelius Academy, because it's sort of like if I don't get in, then I'm sort of the odd one out because everybody else seems to be doing great. But I also had a sort of very weird idea of what musicality looks like because of my cousin who's so talented. She has like perfect pitch and everything, which I don't have. So I always felt like I'm probably not good enough for this music stuff because I'm not kind of child prodigy that she always was. So it was kind of a interesting environment. But it was sort of I played the cello from a fairly young age. That was an instrument that my mom really loved, and she actually owned a cello just as a hobby. But she sold that at some point because she did ask me. I think I was 4 years old when she asked me if I want to play the cello, and I just had learned like off some TV series, some crazy line like "Don't even think about it" or something like that. I just wanted to use that. I didn't even know what I was using that for really. But so she sold the cello, and then a couple of years later, around like I don't remember how old, maybe I was 6 years old or something, and I told her like maybe the cello actually might be a thing. So we had to buy another one. But so that's how I got into playing music, and also I've been really into computers from a very young age. Like I think I was like 4 years old when I got my grandfather's old like Commodore VIC 20, and it had
Nice.
some like cartridges that I would play some video games on, and But then when I had a Commodore Amiga, then there were like music programs on that, and I started to sort of experiment with that, and very quickly, sort of the computer became more interesting than the cello because I was like, oh, I can do all these, use all these crazy sounds, and I can do my own things. So that's kind of how I started sort of just experimenting with composing. And but I still thought I was going to be actually a computer programmer. That was sort of my while I was in high school, it was like clear, like I'm obviously going to the University of Technology in Helsinki. I'm going to study programming. I'm just going to be a computer programmer. The music is just going to be a hobby. But I just sort of got really into film music at that point, and I'd always been a big film buff, and I would used to make my own like horror movies as in grade school already, and but then it was sort of like, oh, there's the film and music can actually I can do all these things at once, and that's how I ended up sort of applying to Sibelius Academy, to the like music technology department because that felt like the most logical sort of place to do this because that they don't have like a film music department. And I got in there and then started sort of looking at like what's next. Now I want to study like actual film scoring, and then noticed like uh, research like a lot of schools around the world, and I landed on USC because it just had many names that I could recognize, like Chris Young, and there were like these people that I actually knew from films. Like, oh, that'd be interesting because I've been just learning theory for now. Like, and now I want to like actually go to learn from people who are doing the actual work right now. So that's how I ended up applying to USC, and I got in 2005. So then I moved to LA for a couple of years and did that, and that was sort of then I started getting like offers for feature films from Finland. So that's kind of also kind of coincides well because um, I had actually that's probably the most important advice that I ever got was I when I got into Sibelius Academy, I called this Finnish film composer Tuomas Kantelinen. I asked him to be sort of my mentor, and but the first thing he said, like, just go to the local film school and just offer to score all the short films they're doing. And it was those relationships that took like 5 6 years to actually graduate into like professional feature films. And it was just about the time I graduated out of USC. I was like, oh, hey, do you want to do a feature film? Like, oh,
Like,
okay.
yes, I do.
So it was a really important advice because if I hadn't sort of gotten out of my comfort zone or if just being locked into the sort of music track of Sibelius Academy, I was just doing my sort of theory assignments. If I hadn't actually gotten out there and tried to work with people, I wouldn't have had those relationships. So that's really what led me into the actual career.
Interesting. It's interesting. I would say almost everybody who I talk to that's in the film, TV type of business, it all comes down to the relationships. But the ones that have made it are the ones that they can always go back to that moment of like, I went out of my comfort zone, just like you said, I was out of my comfort zone, and I didn't feel like I was probably good enough maybe to do it either. But I did this thing. I went to this extra thing. I offered to do the thing for free. I went to they did more than what everybody else. I mean, my guess is you had 10, 20, 30 people in that in the classes with you that all went through the same program, and there's probably very few of them who are actually working in the business and doing, film scoring like they thought they were going to do. But it really, I think it's interesting to see from a success standpoint, if you want to achieve whatever the thing is you want to do, going out of your comfort zone, even though you don't feel like you're maybe worthy, you're not good enough, you're not ready, and giving yourself that permission to just go for it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen if you went there and they said, "Yeah, I don't want you to do that," but oh well, you're probably never going to see that person ever again in your life, right?
Yeah. And it was certainly when you were just sort of starting out with working in films, you really don't have the sort of uh, intuition of what to do. So you really sort of trying to just grasp at straws basically and try to figure out what to do. And at the same time, you'll have like directors who are just working on their first project, so they're very insecure about like the whole thing, and they're afraid the composer's gonna ruin the whole thing. And it's like, so it's kind of this perfect storm of anxiety that you get thrown in when you start off like that, but it's just such an important way to learn how to work with people, and also like really that's how you sort of start to build that intuition of what works, and also what people mean when they say certain things. That's really important, that you half of the time you're sort of an interpreter of what they actually meant when they said
Yeah.
something.
But I'm guessing that from a I mean, you go back 20, I mean, 20, a little bit over 20 years is when you kind of got your start, right? So, I mean, the computers and just digital music world were just coming into existence. Back when you and I were both using 5 1/4 floppy disks to run everything. But it's been interesting to see the evolution. Like I look at the film scoring. I mean, there's never been more opportunities for TV and film than there are today. But I also feel like the library of and then the ease of access to the library of music to put in, as placeholders when you're working directors is real. It's almost overwhelming to see how much there is. And I mean, how do you as a composer work with that director and not have them be like, I'm just going to use this stock music because it works well there. I mean, how does a composer or music person have that conversation with that director to help them want to use, original music, I guess.
Yeah, I've had sort of very little discussions where they would rather use the stock music. Sometimes we'll have like a temp score that does some things that they want me to sort of retain in some way. But I think the sort of the strength of sort of bespoke music for scenes is so strong usually, that there's not a big sort of want to use like some kind of temp track, because they often end up being sort of just static enough to feel a little wrong, a little off. And obviously the horror scenario is if there's like a perfect track that they've really edited the scene to, and then that's going to be an issue. But I've fortunately had fairly little issues like that, because people are sort of very, I feel like people today are very aware of sort of the temp love problem, and they'll sort of preempt that by not even listening to the temp, or using sort of a little worse temp. That's a really good sort of tactic, to not use like the big sort of film music hits, because that the people understand that you're never going to get that. Like even if hire like an A-list Hollywood guy, but if you put their best cue in the place, it's not gonna be that when they score that. So they people understand that that's sort of if you set the bar too high, you're just setting up the composer failure. So I've sort of had uh, fairly good experiences actually with, and also I find that people are very interested in sort of um, really scoring, doing the temp track with the composer, and sort of having original music already in the temp, which is great. It makes you write maybe a bit more, because you sort of you may have to just try different things and find the direction. But I find that's always been better for me to just start very early and just get my music in the temp, so I don't even have to think about the sort of issue of do I need to sort of match some kind of stock or temp track.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure that as you're sitting down or having those discussions with the one or two or three people that are going to be important in deciding on that music, sharing and capturing their story they want to tell. I mean, a lot of times if you look at musicians when they're performing and doing gigs, telling a little bit of the background on the music is super important. But I'm sure I guess how does one collaborate with that director to kind of find the story and then also tell the story to them about the music? And is there instrumentation that you use that match that, or how, what's some examples? I'm sure you've done it several times, and I know with the Netflix one you just did with um, that you did, there's some interesting instruments that were used specifically that you're not going to find on a temp track. So maybe share a little bit about that and how that conversation happened.
Yeah, that film actually, in Little Siberia, we really started from scratch, because I talked with the director Dome Garokowski and about the direction of the music, and he said he had been trying to find sort of reference tracks, but he couldn't really find things that worked for film because it had this very specific aesthetic. So it was really sort of, we really started from scratch, which was kind of scary because then if you fail, then you have no backup plan because it's sort of like, nobody's going to tell me what to do if I don't have the temp track as a safety. So I just started experimenting with basically with different sounds. And there was a point where I was playing like some gamelan percussion loops for Dome, and he was like, "Hey, that kind of sounds kind of like icicles because this takes place in sort of winter time Finland, like very cold sort of sceneries." And he was like, "Hey, that sounds kind of like icicles. Like I think that's there's something interesting there." So I took that as like, okay, I don't now at least have some percussion that works. So so we're gonna start to build from that, and then it was kind of well, like a long process because I already started composing when the director Harri Ylönen he started editing in the spring, and I had been sort of composing demos for him to use in the edit as temp music for a while. And we went for like a very Finnish style summer vacation. Like all of us were like off for July basically. It was like see you in August, and but that was perfect because I had sort of spent enough time with the project where it was sort of my subconscious was already working on it. So it was like week two of my summer vacation when suddenly I'm like, I want jouhikko, this Finnish sort of folk instrument. I want that in the score, and I went and listened to some records from folk musicians, and the first day I get back to work on in August, I just immediately write this sort of theme for the jouhikko, which became sort of main theme for the film. And I had been just all that time I had been sort of struggling, like I don't know what the main theme is. Like this is such a different score. Like I cannot find a melody or something that works. And then literally on day one of coming back from vacation, like there it is. That's it. So it's just an interesting example also of the power of the subconscious to sort of solve these sort of composition questions sometimes.
Yeah, and well, and with that film, I mean, you use that very interesting. I don't even know how to. If, for those that don't know the instrument, it almost reminds me of a kind of boxy cello. Um, I don't. I mean, how would you describe this to somebody if you only could describe with words what?
Yeah,
I don't even know how do you say the instrument again? Because I'm sure most people have never heard of it.
yeah, jouhikko.
Yohiko.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's a really interesting sort of very raw string instrument because you don't even have a fingerboard, so you're kind of just hovering your hands in here, and you're sort of that's why you get this sort of very interesting sort of this kind of microtonal variations in intonation because you're just trying to sort of keep your hand in the right position and move it between positions. So it brings it this very sort of very almost uh, mythical quality somehow to the sound, and I just love everything about it. And it's one of these instruments that you cannot possibly uh, sort of make work with like samples on the computer. Like you have to play it because it has so much sort of the live variation that happens that you cannot sort of fake that on the computer. I was trying to sort of make some demos, but like I had some like there's a Swedish instrument tagelharpa, which is sort of similar, and I had some of those samples, but it just weren't they were
It's
like
not
not in
there.
the ballpark. you know?
Well, and with that little Siberia Netflix project you did there, I mean, you've got that unique instrument, and then I know, I mean, I look at it kind of like a chef in a kitchen. And there's all these flavors, and you're putting different things in the pot, and a lot of time, I mean, there's the known recipes that every composer knows. You know, you got the John Williams recipe, and you got some of these, orchestral recipes, but with that, I would, and it's a very interesting score because you had not only that instrument, but you have all these other elements where there was vocals, but then the vocals kind of go like when I was listening to it, the vocals go a whole different direction into like this jazz scat type of thing that you're just like, whoa, what? But it totally worked. That was what was so interesting and unique about it is, and then you've still, I mean, there's some orchestral, you know, kind of sounds that really just are kind of warm, I felt like. And, how do you find that inspiration, I guess, to when you're cooking in the kitchen for those instruments? How do you decide, hey, let's go crazy Finnish instrument to jazz, and how does that work? I mean, what advice do you have for composers as they're trying to decide on the palette or the ingredients for the big pot they're going to throw this in for the show?
Yeah, that's really it's really hard to say what is actually happening. It's sort of just there's this period every time when you start with the project where it feels like it's just you're not well, sometimes you might get kind of idea quickly, but very often it feels like this time it's gonna fail. Like now I'm totally out of ideas and I'm not gonna come up with anything. And but there's I think it is sort of again related sort of the subconscious that you teach your subconscious how what you actually want to do and then you present the puzzle basically, and then it gets into solving it, and then those things just come up like, oh, it's just random thing that pops up, like I think that might work, and it's sort of this I always try to find reach this sort of flow state almost in conversation because it's so great when sort of you just start to sort of just sort of experience the music, and it kind of just comes out, and it's so different from when you're sort of forcing it and you're trying to be very intellectual about it, and sometimes you need to do that to sort of get going, but it's I think whatever helps you sort of get into that sort of some kind of flow state, or not, maybe not necessarily flow state, but just some kind of place where you kind of feel like you understand the language of the film and the music, then it just becomes so much better what you're able to do. But I don't know where all this stuff comes from. It's sort of this weird sort of free association that sometimes happens when you're like if it's sort of like if random thing that feels like it works, then you might as well try it. And I love those kind of fusion, sort of genre fusion type things that you can sort of really sort of make the audience feel like you don't really know what's going to happen, because it's really going to sort of plays on your expectations when you sort of go into one direction and then you present something completely different just when
Yeah.
they're about to understand, like, oh, I know what this is about, and then you have something else. So
Well, I'm curious. I mean, some of the music that you've done that has had some real. I mean, you've gotten a lot of awards for your nature documentary stuff. I mean, Teleforest, Forest, and Tell of a Lake, and I mean that's been. I mean, your evolution of that. I'm guessing the icicle percussion that you talked about, is there any other really unique type of inspirations as you were working on those documentaries and seeing just some of the beautiful nature types of things that are in those types of projects? I mean, I'd be curious to just know from a musicality standpoint if there's any of those moments that are kind of cool stories behind the music that people don't know about.
yeah, there's a bunch. I think on Tale of the Sleeping Giants, we had some really fun experiments. Like we had this vocal group, Finnish folk music vocal group, Tuuletar, and they were sort of in the studio for like we had like two sessions. Like the first one was the sort of more experimental session because their own music also has sort of experimental vibes. So I wanted to see like can we come up with some interesting sounds, because they'll just do like some very sort of like I asked them to just like sound like the stars in the sky, and they would like sing all these sort of cool little things, that bright short lines. And but we did this experiment where I think I sort of got this idea when I was listening to the the Johan Johansson score for Arrival, I think. Yeah, Arrival. And there was some kind of uh, almost like speech, like vocal that I thought that was interesting, and that just sort of stuck to my mind throughout the years. And then when I was working on this documentary, there was sort of a idea in the script of this sort of like message that the whales send, and it sort of travels throughout the nature. And I was like, what sounds like a message? Well, speech, but I can't really use speech, and I don't want to use language because it's like nature doesn't have like a human language, so I don't want to use that. But what sounds like language? And I was like, let's try this experiment where I asked the director to provide some like uh, important lines in the script that he really feels are sort of central to the movie, and I gave the lines to the vocal group and asked them to hold a chord while they speak that line, and then hold a different chord and hold a different chord. And so we recorded that line with different chords, and then I would take the single chord of that speech and sort of sort of built this sort of random sort of granular texture out of it, and it sort of had this interesting sort of quality of, okay, you kind of feel like it's speech, but it has a tonality because they kept they kept the chord going while they were speaking, and it just brought this interesting texture, and so that was sort of one of the favorite actually cues of the director because of this sort of quality. But the interesting thing is now we're doing live concerts of that documentary. So the vocal group, they had to go back and listen to what I manipulated their voice into, and now they have to emulate that as a live vocal. So they've actually done an amazing job sort of doing a live version of that texture. So we've gone back to live with that. But yeah, that was a really fun experiment that ended up working. It totally sounded weird in the studio because if you're just reading text by keeping a constant pitch, it kind of sounds like you're in a sort of religious ceremony or something, and people are just kind of looking at me weird, like this doesn't sound like this fits this movie at all. And it's just like just wait, I have an idea, but I need me to just edit the material a bit before I show it to you.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so I'm curious, 'cause, I mean, you've done so many projects over the years. I mean, films, and I mean, just dozens and dozens and dozens of projects that are really, world class level. I'm curious, what advice, if it was a director of a feature film or a movie director, what advice would you give to a director person to better work with the composers and kind of get the best out of the composer? I'm just curious from your perspective over the years of working projects, how does a director get the best out of a composer?
yeah, I sort of what I find really important is to sort of get a very good understanding of what the sort of what the subtext of the film is, and what are the things that I could be playing that are not immediately obvious to me, and so I really want to hear what the director really like wants to tell what's the deeper meaning of the story that the director wants to tell, and so being able to sort of describe and sort of verbalize these kinds of things is really useful for me. And also just having that sort of very positive experimental atmosphere, and especially in the beginning of the project where you sort of it's really bad if you get scared of failure. That kind of really mess with your creativity because then you're just trying to not get yelled at basically. But if there's like this feeling of like, oh, that's really cool, like let's try even something crazier or whatever, that's like this sort of positive vibe to it that really makes you want to just try out different things, and I think that's a really important part of the process to make sure that you're really discovering all the possible things that you are there to discover. And once you have a good sort of set of sort of ideas, then you can build the score out of that. Like for Little Siberia, I'm sure there's like as much music that we didn't use that I just because I tried so many different things, but it was just so fun because it's like, oh, let's just send more. Let's see what we can do, and I think that's a really important part of the process is to have that sort of discovery phase and
Yeah.
make it as fruitful as possible.
Well, and I think, I mean, you talk about for the directors that communication of your vision is so critical, and I think on both sides is not being scared. So let's say that's a newer composer and they get their first project. What advice would you have for that person, that's early on in their career doing some films? How does the composer better, communicate? Are there some key things that happen between, with the composer, or I mean, with the director to help, you know, extract that out of the director, or is there a checklist? Is there some magic like spreadsheet that, I'm going to ask this question, this question, this question, and make sure that, I mean, is there any tricks like that that you've found over the years have really been helpful for somebody going into a project?
Yeah, I mean I find directors don't necessarily love the question of what is your movie really about, because that's kind of can be sometimes really hard to sort of give a satisfactory answer to. And I think actually what's really worked best with new directors, because I don't mean new in general, but new to me directors, when you don't really know the person yet, I think it's really good to sort of just sit down together at the studio and just like try out things and you get immediate feedback, because the sort of I mean, it depends, but sometimes the sort of feedback loop of I do something, I send an email, and I get an email back. That can be slow, and it can also be hard for some directors to sort of really describe what they actually want. So when you sort of get that more immediate feedback of being present in the room, that's really useful. I mean, it can be very uncomfortable. I'm one of those people who's really sort of I really want to be in my own dungeon and just compose and then present the the piece and run away when people listen to it. So I need to experience the anxiety of if they don't like it, but it's just very useful to get as much of that immediate feedback as possible. So I would always encourage that, especially if you have a sort of if it's your first time working with a director, then being able to be present in a room somehow, at least at some point when they're sort of listening to music, it's very useful because you can get a lot more information that way. But also just the fact like if you're able to uh, join the project early so you can actually get the temp track going with your own music. That's really useful. Sort of silent feedback where you get just by seeing what they used and how they used the music. That tells you a lot actually. You don't need to sort of discuss if you just see like, oh, they like that piece and but maybe they used it in a way that didn't even think about it. So that's not one thing that I think helps usually is to just be there early and allow them to sort of experiment with your music. But yeah, also the sort of in person sort of working at some stage is very useful.
I think that in person, I sometimes think with the younger generation, I mean, it's so easy to communicate with text or WhatsApp or email, and and as quick and easy as it is, there's something to be said for having the facial expressions, the body language, and just you can almost you just feel that energy. And I mean, you're in Helsinki, and my guess is a lot of these projects are you're working with people that are in LA. I mean, I'm guessing that there's been times that it's been absolutely worthwhile for you to come over and be in the room, even though I don't know how many hours of flight to get over here would be to get to LA, but it's probably a lot. But sounds like it taking that extra effort to be there in the room is a difference maker.
Yeah, I would, especially if you don't know the director from before, I would say if you sort of once you work with the director before, you kind of start to know what the how the process is going to go and how they communicate. And then I've noticed with people who I've worked with for many times, we I'll have like a very short brief and I'll just do something like, yeah, it's fine. So it's like it's very it really depends. But yeah, for especially when you're working with somebody for the first time, I would definitely prefer sort of
No.
being present locally.
What I'm curious, we're kind of talking about these younger composers. What are some of the weaknesses that you see in, kind of the newer composers that they may not even be aware of? I mean, it probably you probably had some of these types of things that you've learned to overcome, but I mean, what are some of the weaknesses or areas that you're like, okay, as a composer, you need to watch out for that? I mean, maybe you're sitting in the room with yourself 20 years ago, and if you could just say, hey, don't do that thing or do this thing, just be aware of what you don't even aren't even aware that you're doing to help somebody
Yeah.
who's newer.
Yeah, there's I think for me that something that I've really had to learn is sort of try to see the big picture of like what is sort of important and like that's where schedule often helps because you have a deadline, so you cannot really spend time fixing the counterpoint in some small moment or whatever because it's like I gotta move on. But that's definitely I think that's being able to sort of look from the top down at the project. That's really important because it's really easy when you're starting out is to get caught in the details and also that affects your scoring because you might completely lose that here's a great place to just play the theme over the sequence and you don't need to worry about every cut and everything that happens but when you're sort of starting out you're like really eager to just hit everything and I want to show that I can do these complex things and I can sort of show off my sort of composition technique and then you completely forget the music and the film and what it's actually about and there's this like bigger thing that you're about to tell and you're not just describing this action in the scene. So I think that's definitely something that I've sort of had to learn during the years is to just get a more of a top-down view of the projects. I don't know if there's a sort of quick way to get to that point. Maybe that's just something that happens with experience. I don't know, but I would certainly, if I was advising myself again at USC, I would sort of say like you better pay attention to that because that's going to be really important that you sort of don't get caught in the details and try to find ways to just play music and in the scene and not worry so much about all the sort of technique that you think is important. And that's definitely one. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I'm curious, as you've evolved as a composer, I'm sure your definition of what success, 20 or 20 plus years ago as a musician, a successful musician, what you thought was then is different now. I'm curious to know, having gone down the path, what would you define to somebody now as a successful musician to you?
Yeah, that's tough one. Like I, my first instinct is to say that you can sort of make a living doing that, but I think you can still be a very successful musician and do make a living with something else as well. So I don't know if that's a good way. It's just I think um, whenever you're just really doing something that is really sort of but that you're really good at and you're sort of able to do that and provide sort of uh, something that people really want. I think that's the definition, I think. But obviously, if you're able to make a living doing that, then that's even better.
But and I think the making a living is like the bonus, but what I can see just from hearing your stories and you find a lot of joy in kind of capturing those emotions and seeing those moments in the pictures that you're scoring. Um, I can feel that joy, and that in a lot of ways I almost wonder if that's like the success you'd almost don't want to say, but I think that's in a lot of ways just finding that happiness in your music and being able to do that, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point because that's something that has definitely changed a lot. Because when I started off doing this, I was so sort of focused on the sort of like I gotta get sort of successful projects, and I was like looking at like how well does the movie go and all that, and I've just sort of become so laser focused on the journey now. Like I uh, just get into my studio every day and I get to work on music and that's like the best. But like I don't, no premiere is gonna top that feeling anymore because I sort of am able to sort of concentrate on that. And that's I think a really important thing to realize because you can always lose the premieres and you might get bad numbers or you might not get gigs at all, but you can always get the joy out of working with music. So I think just being able to really focus on that, I think has also helped get some of the stress out of working. Even though I've been, like right now I've been working like 14-hour days because I have had some crazy deadlines and it's just like almost. I think I would sort of passed out if I did this when I got out of school because I would be so stressed. But I'm actually like, yeah, the days are long, but I'm like, I know it's gonna be fine. Like I've done this before, and anyway, it's like I get to do music, so I just focus on that, and so I think the outlook has really changed in that way. Like I really focus on that, the joy of music.
Yeah. But last question for you. So I'm curious where, if you could like identify, is there one moment where you kind of had that aha moment or like the most memorable music moment you've ever experienced? Whether that's like getting to play, have your orchestra play for you. I mean, is there one of those moments like just the emotions kind of you just had this realization like, ah, I mean, that you just will remember forever? I'm curious what that moment might be.
Yeah, there's multiple ones, but I feel like the thing that really stuck to my head is when I was working on this first feature film, The Home of Dark Butterflies, and I actually booked a recording in London for that because I had been just to studying in LA, so I felt like I would be very comfortable with sort of the London studio scene because it's so similar. So that was a finished film, but I booked the Angel Studios in London for that and the musicians from there, and the schedule was really tight. So I was I remember I was up all night the day before my flight, and I almost missed the flight. I went to the airport because I realized like I had been up all night and now it's too late. Like I need to move, and I the check-in desk was closed. I was like, oh, I think I missed my recording session. But the airport personnel helped me on the plane. It was like just got into the gate at the last minute, and it was kind of a surreal experience because that was my first time in London. I haven't got any sleep, so I'm just feeling very surreal about the whole thing. And but it was such an amazing feeling just having those like top players of London and the entire world basically playing that score, which has really turned out to be really important to me also in my career. And that whole sort of thing felt surreal because if it had been this such a sort of uh, uh, basically just the extended sprint into the finish line because we had kind of a tight schedule on that and kind of having it turn out quite well, and it just sounded really nice. Obviously the players were amazing, and it was kind of a unforgettable experience because that was my sort of first feature, and just like a very special one at that, and then kind of that whole experience of being there, very 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 tired and but happy, and it was that definitely sticks to my mind now.
It's interesting. So the hardest, most difficult, or most painful things we sometimes do are oftentimes the thing. I think it's just because they mean more to us. You know, you realize what you went through to get to that thing. So that's interesting that that's one that comes to your mind most. Well, Panu, thank you so much for taking some time and sharing. There has been there's been a lot of gold nuggets and some amazing advice that you have shared today. For those listening, I mean, go listen to Panu. If it's Panu Aaltio, we're going to put the links in the show notes, but it's Aaltio. If you're going to type it in on your phone, you want to go listen to some of the scores and music. It's incredible. Spotify's got a whole bunch of, there's just a whole bunch there, but this is a very talented person and composer that you can go learn a lot from, just probably studying your scores and go on and look at that. So keep doing amazing things, Panu, and appreciate you taking time and sharing time out of your busy day with all the people that are listening today.
Yeah, thanks so much for great for interview. It was great pleasure bringing on. Thank you so much.
And then go look at your website. Go look at his website. It's panualtio.com. Again, click those show notes and go check it out, and you are in for a treat. So thanks so much, guys. Hey, it's Jason here, and I hope you've gotten a lot of value out of this episode. Be sure to check out our show notes to learn more about our guest today, and if you'd like to support our podcast, there's a few things that you can do to help us grow. First, if you hit subscribe, it will help ensure that you don't miss a future episode. Second, if you'll share it with your friends on social media or send it via email or message, it helps us spread the word as well. And third, if you'll leave an honest review, it really helps with the algorithms so that other people can find our podcast. Finding success and fulfillment in the music industry is possible, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.